So welcome everyone to our monthly Beak Share and Learn. Today is a quite an exciting Share and Learn, as what we're going to do is take a real deep dive into some of the hands-on activities that were presented at the ASEE Education Showcase Conference. Because many of us, including myself, attended that workshop and really loved it, but it was so short and so brief, and we didn't have enough time to really be able to dive in and be able to talk to the presenters and really learn about some of the cool activities and new things that they're trying within their classroom. So today's activity, we're focused around hands-on activities. And I have with me Naji Husseini from UNC and NC State University, LeAnn Dourte from University of Pennsylvania, and Mansy from University of Florida, each who presented at the ASEE Education Showcase and have some really cool activities, like I said, that are a little more hands-on. So I thought this would be a really great way of learning a little bit more of how to actually implement this within your classroom and answer any questions that you might have had. Or if you were not able to come to our ASEE Education Showcase or the conference, be able to get a nice free presentation from the conference and be able to really talk with our group. So because we have three presenters today, they're each going to present for about 5 minutes, just introducing what they did as their activity. And then we have 3 breakout rooms available so that you can hop between each of the breakout rooms and have a really nice conversation and chat about kind of the details and what it really takes to be able to implement this within the classroom. Just fair warning, May does have to leave a little bit early, so she'll take any questions you have in the beginning, and then if you want to hop to other rooms after she leaves, you're more than welcome to. So without further ado, let's maybe we start with Naji. Oh, and I forgot, I got to do my shameless plug. Sorry, before we do that for next month. My apologies. So just so you know, for next month, what we're going to be having as our monthly share and learn is actually a game-based activity. So adventures in game-based learning and learning how to do this within the bioengineering curriculum. And this will be led by Ali Ansari, an assistant professor of teaching at University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. And this one will be on Thursday, December 21st, instead of Wednesday, in hopes that we're swapping around some of these dates that you can attend more based on your teaching schedule. And it'll be from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern. Zoom link and sign up are exactly the same. And if there is anything you miss or if you can't attend it, please do check out our website, beakvirtual.org. We have our annual conference coming up. We do monthly member spotlights, as well as record and post our share and learns and all the information associated with it. Sorry about that. I have to do my shameless plugs. So please, without further ado, welcome Naji, who will present his hands-on activity on DIY motion capture. Thanks.
There we go. It's like I've never done this before or something. I'm out of practice. So anyway, my name is Naji Husseini. I'm currently coming from the Raleigh side of my joint appointment at UNC and NC State. And in fact, as we speak, my students are right now down the hall and around the corner doing some of these very activities with motion capture. So I'd like to talk a little about motion capture and the kinds of things that we can do, because as you can see over here, we've got some interesting BME related activities that in my programming class, we try to be able to do practical things throughout the semester so they realize why bother programming. So I'd like to talk a little about the activity, one in particular, and more of the broad thing is, why do you want to connect these early classes to more advanced BME topics? So for starters, in programming class, we teach our own in-house programming class. They're often disconnected from the real world. The students are getting fake data. They're not really having any important data output. They don't really have interest in ownership because they're not collecting and doing something with the data. And a lot of departments, ours is sort of unique. Many departments might outsource their programming to a general engineering programming class, which might cover everything from operating systems to GUIs to interfaces that maybe aren't the most practical thing for biomedical engineering students. So what I try to do is I try to do practical in-class activities early and often so that right from the start, we might be learning what a variable is, but also learning how it relates to the topics they need it for. So I'm going to touch on motion capture, but I've done a lot of examples. Some of these are available in a paper, somewhat of an early paper, embarrassed in some ways about it, but I do present how I've used Raspberry Pis for input and output, for reaction timing, for making basic motion detectors, and you can see some of those details or ask me about those a little bit later. But specifically, motion capture is a pretty important topic that's used in a lot of rehabilitation engineering applications, whether it's looking at mice and joint motion as they're on a treadmill to making Ryan Reynolds look like Pikachu. It really shows up, and it's something students have very strong connections to through their daily lives. And that gets a nice connection from normal activities to biomedical engineering to something that doesn't require that much complicated programming skills, but can have a really neat output. So from our perspective, this is cheap, easy, and effective to do and implement in our classes. And from a student's perspective, it's fun, creative, and visual. So what do we need? First of all, well, I said cheap, and I'm not lying. Really, what you need is a bunch of finger lights. You can buy this set on Amazon for 30 bucks. This has all sorts of different color lights, and after you're done with your motion capture lab, you can go out to the raves on Friday nights and party like it's whenever, 2017. You need rubber bands and tapes to attach these to various points on the body. Now, you need a recording device. Fortunately, grafted onto every student's hand is a phone, and that has a video camera, which they can then process on a computer. And the last thing is, in this case, we're teaching in MATLAB. You could do this in other programming languages, though MATLAB does make some things fairly simple to do if you have access to that. The way this sequence is structured is in week 1, I have students process a video that I've provided. So at this point in the class, it's the end of the semester. It's a 1-semester class that doesn't assume any prior experience. Students know how to do color thresholding and segmentation, centroid tracking, and we've had a little bit of practice with some assignments. And in class, during their 2-hour session, I give them a video to process. So the video on the left is where they have a video of me walking. They locate the position of each of those joints, and they track those centroids as I walk. Then from there, they can calculate with some basic derivatives. They can do some velocity vectors to show the motion of that, and then make a short stick figure. So in and of itself, this is pure motion capture. In later classes, in my biomechanics class for solid mechanics, we actually use these velocity vectors and accelerations to calculate power and forces at each of the joints. But for now, we're starting simple, but I show them how this can connect to later stuff. Where it comes into the fun stuff is then in week 2. So they processed a video that I provided, and we've given them some initial feedback. Now we give them those lights that I showed you and some tape and Velcro, and then they go ahead and try to do some activity that's related to their hobby. So whether it's attaching it to arms, legs, other parts of their body, I encourage them to be creative, and they run around the hallways doing stuff. So in the example of one student, she's on the dance team, so she attached it to her hip, her knee, and the ball of her foot roughly. And she's trying to practice doing a simple leg raise. So you see the leg raise over there. And she's trying to use a black background. So she's got the black leggings to improve the image contrast. And when you process this, it's not a beautiful thresholded image, but you can see the centroid motion. And then when you track the velocity vectors, you can see how this goes up and down. So now, again, what we're trying to do is make sure the students, why are they doing this? This connects to their life, and it's just what she wanted to do. So I don't force them to do something they don't care about. Other students have been creative. So we've had students that have also looked at lunges. So in this case, the student lunges. This is just the stick figure. Now, you could argue about the positioning of those trackers, but his knee comes almost in front of the ball of his foot, which is generally not great lunge practice because it can lead to some additional stresses on the body parts. So we can develop this, and this is what we're doing this semester, is then having them actually propose a device that could be used as a computer app or a phone app to be used for, say, rehabilitation or some sort of practical application. Sometimes students get creative. In this case, she did a cartwheel. She did a cartwheel. It wasn't the greatest of tracking, but again, it doesn't matter because this student did about 30 cartwheels over and over again, just trying to get it to work, not because she needed to, because she was interested in doing it. So overall, the take-home message that I get out of this is that students appreciate this because with a programming class that can be bland, they're doing stuff they want to do and tying in their hobbies and activities. And then they can start to see how this connects. Again, we're trying to broaden this connection in this early sophomore level class. Additionally, it's much more fun than just hello worlds and simulated data sets. Every course evaluation I get mentions this as one of the students' favorite activities, and these visual activities show up on job portfolios and interviews and examples that people do. So this is what I can be happy to talk about during the breakout session. There's a link to the presentation, though the videos don't play out, if you'd like to see that and have some more information. And I'm also happy to send you any MATLAB files or whatnot that you might have questions on. Thank you.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. Sorry, I was trying to quickly get that. I don't know if you could put your QR code back up for
You
everyone.
missed your chance. I'm sorry. Hold on.
No, I just was in case anyone else missed a chance. I was
Yeah, yeah.
about it, but
I'll find it in just a second.
now I
Too
have to
many
figure out
windows
how to
open.
get it off my phone.
There you go.
There we go. Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, just give it a second in case anyone needs it. Awesome. All right, thank you. Wow, it was great. Okay, so next up we have yeah, that was awesome. Let's see. Do we want to do May or LeAnn? Dealer's choice. Okay, we'll do LeAnn Dourte just because I'm staring in this direction. um so LeAnn, if you can mute yourself, that would be great. And so LeAnn is coming from University of Pennsylvania, Florida, and will be presenting. Oh, I just had your title up here. It was a long one. Sorry. On creating a biophysical, a physical biomechanical model using wood, which I thought was cool too.
Awesome. All right, so nice to see all of you. Started here. All right, so this is a hands-on activity that I use in my second year biomechanics class. It's essentially a statics and introduction to strength and materials course. And I'm trying to come up with opportunities for students to connect the mathematics to physical reality, which is something that they really hate doing, but that I think is particularly important, especially in this type of course. And so just to give you a little background, a little refresher on some physics, we know that Newton's third law, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And then in biomechanics, we represent the way objects are connected to other objects by this mathematical concept called a support. And so supports can provide both translational or rotational support. So we go back to Newton's laws and thinking about equilibrium, both in translational motion as well as rotational motion. And so the history behind this was that, I used to present this in a very mathematical way. I'd show them these pictures on the left and the right that you're seeing, and they would just look at me blankly and say, I don't understand, like, how are you getting these pictures to turn into these things with forces or these things with moments on them? And so I really wanted to give them the opportunity to see this physical connection, but also to try to empower them, to let them know, hey, you actually could have figured this out on your own. That a lot of what we do in engineering, at least in mechanics, we observe physically first, and then the math comes afterwards. And so kind of a secondary goal of empowering them through that process. So in this particular hands-on activity, I actually do 4 of them throughout the course of the semester, introducing each of the major topics in the course. This one is to introduce these reactions. A PowerPoint wants to work. And so really, I'm trying to give them the bare minimum of information before they actually do this activity. Again, emphasizing with them that they too can come up with these ideas on their own. And so prior to this activity, really the only things we've talked about are equilibrium. So sum of the forces equals 0 and the sum of the moments equals 0. We talked about free body diagrams, this idea of free the body. They've all had Newtonian mechanics from physics, but now I'm really trying to introduce some of the more engineering concepts that we do. So I remind them that they've seen normal forces before. This, in physics, you do the block on an inclined plane. They've all done it a billion times. The block pushes down on the plane pushes up on the block. That's really a reaction. I remind them mathematically that vectors can be broken into 3 orthogonal components. So that's kind of the only mathematical basis that I'm giving. And I've never mentioned the word support to them before. So what I'm trying to do, again, is really establish this physical relevance. How do you actually take these pictures, whether it's the picture of a hip or the picture of an elbow, and how in the world do you actually get to these to these figures with forces on them or with moments on them? All right, so this is one example of what I do. So what they do is they walk into class and they work in groups of 3, and they are given, I'm holding up a baggie in case you are need to look at that video. a baggie with a screwdriver in it, with a bunch of screws in it, with some hinges in it, and they were given 2 pieces of wood. Some students, this is the very first time they have ever picked up a screwdriver, which is beyond me when you're 19 years old, but I'm glad that I am introducing it to everybody. And they're essentially asked to take these things in front of them and model something. So they go through a bunch of different steps, whether that's like a 2D fixed suture of the skull or the shoulder. Here I'm showing you some of the steps where they create an elbow joint. So their first step is they assemble the elbow joint. They all essentially come up with this. They're using a hinge. They put the 2 pieces of wood together, and they can model this as something physical in front of them. And then the scaffolding of the activity walks them through, okay, can you pull these things apart in the X direction? Can you pull them apart in the Y? Can you pull them apart in the Z? And then asking them to do the same process in rotation. Can you rotate about X? Can you rotate about Y? And you'll notice there's only one axis that you can rotate about. So then leading them down that path of taking those physical observations and translating them onto a free body diagram, actually representing those things that resisted motion as forces or as moments. So that's kind of the big picture idea. Like I said, I have them go through a bunch of different joints. They build about 3 different things in this activity, and then hopefully try to connect that back to what I call the table in the book, which is a big table in the book with all of these connections and the reactions on them. So that's the big picture.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. Wow. Yes, I also am always surprised that students have never seen a screwdriver before. I don't know why they don't IKEA their stuff. All right. So last but not least, because I want to make sure we have plenty of time for chats, is May Mansy. May Mansy is coming from the University of Florida and will be presenting her hands-on activity on a transcutaneous electrical nerve. This one also has a long name, sorry. Transcutaneous external nerve stimulation in biosignals using a TENS unit, probably one of my most favorite ways of electrocuting myself.
Thanks, Christine. So thank you all for having us again. As Christine just mentioned, introducing the TENS activity that I started in my biosignals and systems class. And oh, there he is. Okay. So I'm teaching signals and systems, which is basically a 3000 level course, and similar to everybody else's problem is engagement, right? So the thing that I'm teaching is I'm trying to help the students understand and provide them with the fundamental concepts of mathematical modeling, right? But then mathematical modeling, as in Naji's case, right, in programming, it's omnipresent, it's everywhere, right? So we are trying to focus a little bit more on biologically and clinically relevant signals and systems, but still the concepts are always very abstract, like Fourier series, Fourier transforms, time domain and frequency domain analyses. Those concepts, they don't come intuitively at all. So the solution that we as educators always go to is like, oh, let's link those kind of things when the content is so dry. Let's link it to some BME applications, which is great and everything and helps me keep the students a little bit more engaged. But I still have issues have them create meaning to the numbers, to the values, right? So the lack of meaning persists. And as long as there's lack of meaning, as long as they don't really know what it means, that number, the engagement is not as good as it is, and I can still lose them, halfway through the semester or something like that. So things like, signal properties that we tend to talk about, amplitude, frequency, power, the average or the mean of a signal, they are really good with the math. They can plug in the values and crank up numbers, and it's great, but they don't know what they're doing or what it actually means. So for instance, they're okay with if the answer to one of the problems, when I ask them, okay, so what's the current that artificial, external defibrillator needs to output if you want to if you want to give somebody a shock, they're okay if it comes out as 3 kiloamps. And I'm like, how are you okay with that value, right? So I had an open discussion with them, and they basically told us, told me that they didn't know how much is okay and how little is not okay or stuff like that, right? So I started to think, what are other abstract concepts or other physical quantities that the students already know, but they're doing much better with? So they know things like distance, like acceleration, like velocity, because they experience them on a daily basis. The distance they have to walk up the hill to get to my class, etc. Right? So my question became is like, how do I make them experience signal properties in a way that allows them to be like, okay, if the current comes out more than 100 milliamps, that's not okay, right? My current should probably be a lot less than that. If my frequency is negative, that doesn't even make sense physically, right? So things like this. So I bought the transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulator unit, which it's available on Amazon. It's for like $37 or something like that. So, but the thing is, it's commercially available. It's clinically proven, right? Physicians prescribe it to their patients, and they play around together with it to adjust it to the certain stimulation parameters that would allow them to induce, muscle rehabilitation or pain reductions and things like that. So it's a real life example. And then I get them to try that on themselves. And in that example, those stimulation parameters, like the square wave of how the current that's being used to stimulate the muscles, these are things they can actually experience, right? So the way I go about this learning activity is, number one, I give them a Canvas assignment in which, here's a quick screenshot of that. They have to prepare for it. So they get to know the objective about this, what we're trying to achieve here. And then they have to prepare and do some reading, which is basically reading through the manual of that device, because at the end of the day, it's a medical device that they're going to apply to themselves. So I want them to pay attention to the cautions, the warnings. If some of the students has like, a pacemaker or some other implantable device, or maybe like a diabetes patch or something like that, then they know that maybe that's not a great thing to do during class, so they can kind of opt out of this. And then it's also my way of receiving consent, because this is sort of an experiment, right? So they have to write out that they have completed the assignment and that they want to use it, or they can opt out of it and not use it and just be, observers, basically. So after the assignments, they come in, and then I explain to them what we're about to do. So we agree that we're going to try 4 different electrode positions, which allow you to recruit different kinds of muscles and see different kinds of reactions. And while we're doing this, I think I failed to mention that that unit is a dual channel. So you can actually run 2 students or 2 patients at the same time. So we're going to look at the threshold of perception, which are physiological things that they have learned about in other courses. So I try to tie it to other course content that they've heard about before. Excuse me. And basically play around with this, and then they can also vary the amplitude, the width and the rate, or the frequency, which are those signal properties that we've been talking about. But this time they can actually sense it, basically. And we're going to go up with our amplitude until we hit the threshold of comfort, right? So where is it that you start to feel like it's not fun anymore, right? And that's where we stop. So while doing this, I also ask them some random questions about things in the manual, like, okay, what is the maximum current that this unit can even, potentially output? They should know it's somewhere between 0 to 100 milliamps. It's variable depending on the mode that you set it to, but they know at any instant, if they crank everything up, which I obviously don't advise them to do, it will be 100 milliamps. We play around with 2 stimulation modes. It's just different kinds of tingling, so to speak, right? And we put up the different waveforms. We try and talk about it. And then I ask them, why they think these 3 modes are interesting. So at this point in the semester, we have talked about energy and power and whatnot. So they should realize or be able to recognize that, okay, in those modes, we change the waveform in certain ways, but we still maintain the same amount of charge or the same amount of energy. Basically, the area under the curve at the end of the day is equal. And then I put up those little YouTube videos that show the 4 different electrode placements and the kind of muscle recruitment that is going to happen. And I split them up into teams. And then Each team will have 1 unit, and then in each team, they can do 2 people at the same time. Obviously, they have a ton of fun doing this, so I can show you a couple videos here. So you can see here the finger flexion, and then here as well. Oops, sorry. And then there are also other pictures showing other students basically not shocking themselves, but stimulating themselves. Moving on. After that, after I managed to get them to quiet down again, because it's like a circus in the classroom, right? They get super excited about it. They go nuts with it. And I have to keep my eyes and the eyes of the TAs and LAs and everybody else on the teaching team to keep track of who's doing what so they don't mess things up a little bit. After they calm down, I walk them through some reflection, because I want them to, now that they've sensed the signal properties and, you know, the thing that I originally wanted out of that activity, I also want them to think about the device design. How easy was that to use, right? How comfortable was this? If you were the patient, would that device work for you? And I kind of contrast it to another device for them to think about it in terms of, you know, device design. And then their personal experience and how there's so much intersubject variability, and the relevance of what we've done to other courses. A lot of them ask, okay, did we stimulate the nerve or did we stimulate the muscle? And they start to think back to what they've learned in physiology, and they try to make sense of what's happening, right? So I like to do this after that activity also to help them think about their other courses and how they are linked to what I'm doing with them in signals and systems, because we all know how our students are treating their courses as silos, right? That being said, there are some limitations to that activity. It's definitely better in a smaller class size. So I have about 60 or so, which is really, really stretching it. And I have to have at least 2 or 3 LAs with me in the classroom. Students buy in. So sometimes I'll have a larger proportion of the classroom who would not want to put the electrodes on themselves, in which case it's not as fun or it's not as experiential. And then obviously students' obedience, in which they follow the rules and they don't do dumb things, basically. So this is the activity that I wanted to share with you today, and I'll be happy to answer any questions or clarify anything.
There we go. All right, thank you so much. That was awesome. So just to make sure we have plenty of time or enough time for me and everyone to ask questions, I'm going to open the breakout rooms now. So